We're back here, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Again, you're ready for Game 4 between the New York Rangers and the Philadelphia Flyers. Rangers win Game 3 by a score of 4-1 here in Philly. And now joining us on the hotline is the play-by-play voice of the New York Rangers on 98.7 ESPN, and that's our good buddy, Kenny Albert. Kenny, Zach Gelb here. How you doing?
I'm good, Zach. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and big news for the Flyers. We saw Mason play a little bit in that Game 3, but he didn't get the start. He's going to get that start coming up for Game 4. What can we expect out of the Flyers goaltender and Steve Mason?
Well, he hasn't played in 2 weeks as far as in a starting role. He did come in for the last 7-15 in Game 3. Obviously had a pretty good regular season, 32 wins, which is among the top 10 in the league, and from a Rangers standpoint, I think the biggest difference is that they catch with different hands. Mason and Emery. One is a left-handed goaltender and one is right-handed. But, I think Emery did a nice job as well in Game 2 and obviously took the 4-1 loss in Game 3. So we'll see what happens on Friday with Mason in net for Philly.
It's a must-win for the Flyers. They can't go down 3-1 going back to MSG, and I understand they did win Game 2, but they still struggled there in their last 10 games. And one player that's been very quiet in this postseason, and it's been very surprising, has been Claude Giroux. They thought with last change that he would get some production, got 2 shots in Game 3. But why has Claude Giroux been this bad up against the Rangers in his career?
Well, I think you probably have to credit the Ranger defenseman, Ryan McDonough and Dan Girardi, the guys that he's usually out against. He finally had a couple of shots in Game 3 after going 4 straight games against the Rangers without a shot on goal. I thought he played better in Game 2, the game at the Garden that the Flyers won on Sunday. He was better in that game than in Game 1. And then in Game 3, I thought there were a number of chances, Zach, where he could have shot the puck and decided not to, decided to pass it instead. So I don't know if there's an injury issue or what it might be, but he obviously has not scored a goal in the series, only has the 2 shots. I know I read Craig Berube's comments about the power play. He feels there's some overpassing going on between Giroux and Timonen. He'd like to see Voracek have the puck more on the power play, so we'll see what adjustments the Flyers might make before tomorrow night's game.
I didn't think the goalie controversy was a big deal going into the series. Emery did play well in 3 games. They're still down 2-1, but the 2 players that I said the Flyers needed to step up were Giroux, just because of his bad struggles in the past, and also Wayne Simmonds, because we know how good the other goaltender, Henrik Lundqvist, is in net. Simmonds is always a lethal player in front, but he hasn't really displayed it in this series. What have you noticed the Rangers do so well on Wayne Simmonds that have kind of made him very quiet in this series?
Well, you're right. His only goals coming to an empty net in Game 2, and he's been a guy that's had a lot of success against the Rangers, especially last season during the regular season. He had 6 or 7 points, a number of power play goals, but hasn't been as much of a factor in this series. I think overall the Rangers had the edge in Games 1 and 3 as far as territorial play, and that probably has a lot to do with it, with that Flyers top line, including Simmonds not having the puck as much as they would probably like.
We're spending a few minutes with Kenny Albert here, the play-by-play voice of the New York Rangers on 98.7 ESPN. Zach Gelb here with you on WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. And you're right, you got to give credit to Girardi, McDonough, Stroman. Those defenders for the Rangers have been playing well. What does Craig Berube, though, need to change up to try to get some more offensive production? I know you mentioned the passing on the power play, but what does Chief have to do if he wants to get some more goals generated on the ice?
Well, they certainly can use some more goals, especially at even strength. Their forwards have only 1 goal at even strength in the entire series. So, again, not sure exactly what he needs to do as far as adjustments go, but, I think he talked about what he wants to do differently on the power play. And, I know a lot's always made of that first pass coming out of his zone. And when you look at the Flyers defensemen, I think, Streit and McDonald have done a nice job. Timonen's been okay. Luke Shen has actually surprised me offensively. He's leading the team in shots with 8 over the series. So I think they just need more shots from their forwards and more time in the offensive zone.
On the flip side, the Rangers, Brad Richards has had a really good first 3 games, and that means a lot knowing what happened last year, having bad postseason play, and a lot of people are calling for him to be amnestied, actually. What have you noticed change about Brad Richards? Because he's had a very nice season this year with the New York Rangers.
And I think a lot has to do with the work he did in the offseason. It was well documented that leading up to the lockout last year, he was involved during the lockout. He was involved in the negotiations and a number of charity events following Hurricane Sandy. And he has said that he probably didn't spend as much time getting ready for the season as he should have, with the uncertainty of when the season would get underway. but that was not the case last summer. He worked with the Prentice Group up in Connecticut, Ben Prentice, who works with a number of hockey players, Marty St. Louis among them, and Chris Kreider, and guys from all over the league who are from the New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts area. And that really helped him this year. He got off to a good start to the season. He scored 5 goals in the first 8 games. Even though the team was struggling, he was playing well and wound up with 20 goals. And the Rangers have a lot of depth at center. When you look at Derek Stepan, Derek Brassard, Brad Richards, and then Dominic Moore on the fourth line. Brian Boyle can play center if needed. And those guys slide in well. And Richards on the third line with Carl Hagman, who uses his speed. And then they've had different line mates with Jesper Fast and Dan Carcillo in the playoffs. Callahan was in that spot before the trade. But he's just had a steady season. He's a team leader. He wears one of the A's. With Callahan gone, they don't have a captain, so Richards has stepped up in the leadership role as well.
Rangers also power play has improved from a year ago when it was under John Tortorella, and you've seen AV and Arneal has done a really good job with this unit. And the thing that has impressed me the most, as we're spending a few minutes here with Kenny Albert, has been the passing on the power play by the New York Rangers. They're really making the goaltender, Emery, through the first 3 games move from left to right, east to west.
Yeah, they are, and I think when you look at the skill on the top 2 units, Derek Brassard, Matt Zuccarello, and Benoit Pouliot have been their number 1 power play unit for the entire year, and they've been terrific, and they're all good puck movers. And then Nash, St. Louis, and Stepan have played very well in this series. They both have a point in every game. St. Louis has 5 points. Stepan has a couple of goals. Nash has 4 assists. So you're right, Zach. They've done a terrific job moving the puck.
You look at Marty St. Louis, that was the big trade that was made at the deadline as they sent Ryan Callahan down south, and up north came Marty St. Louis. And we all know the leadership he has and the postseason experience, and he's played really well for the Rangers, getting 2 goals in this first 3 series when he struggled going into the playoffs to get some goals for the Rangers. But he's also been very well passing the puck. You look at a player like Marty St. Louis, how big was that move to bring him in and add him at the deadline, especially knowing the Rangers' struggles in the postseason in the past scoring the puck?
Well, there was so much that went into it. The Callahan contract situation, the Rangers did not want to pay him what he was looking for, and you don't want to lose him for nothing after the season. So they get Marty St. Louis, a guy who led the league in scoring last year and was 8th in the league in scoring when they acquired him. And as you said, Zach, he struggled offensively with the Rangers, only 1 goal in 19 games during the regular season, but he's turned it on in the playoffs. He has 5 points, and he's been among their better players. He's played very well. He's got a lot of playoff experience, won a Stanley Cup with Brad Richards back in 2004. So I think what we're seeing now is what the Rangers hoped to get from when they made the trade for Marty St. Louis.
And it looks like St. Louis and Richards haven't missed a beat getting put together on the same line, and they've both been playing really well in these Stanley Cup playoffs. How impressed have you been, that, especially with those two, and they haven't played together in a long time, and we know they have the chemistry, that they were pretty much able to rebuild that chemistry the minute they got to New York?
Yeah, they have, and they play on the same power play unit. They don't play on the same line for the most part. They did when St. Louis first came here, but St. Louis moved up to that Nash step-on line. But on the power play, they certainly do have chemistry. The Ranger power play struggled a bit down the stretch. They were 5 for the last 48, but they've scored some big goals in the playoffs, especially the 2 during the 4-minute advantage in Game 1.
A few more questions here with Kenny Albert, the play-by-play voice of the New York Rangers, as we're getting ready for Game 4 between the Rangers and the Flyers coming your way at the Wells Fargo Center. You mentioned Rick Nash. He hasn't been able to bury the puck in this series, but he has had put up a few assists. Is it just a matter of time before Nash scores? Because he has been getting shots in this series. Yeah,
I think it is. He's working hard, and you're right. He does have a lot of shots. I think he has 18 now in the 3 games, and the assists is something that wasn't happening for Nash down the stretch in the regular season. I think he had only 4 in the last 41 regular season games, and now he has 4 in this series so far over the first 3.
The Rangers, they win back home ice advantage after winning Game 3. Game 4 is a must-win for the Flyers, in my opinion. I don't like their chances if they go down 3-1. But we were talking to Ken Danico earlier in the week, and it was after that Easter Sunday game where the Rangers went up 2-0, and then they lost the game. And Danico said that goes back to the Rangers not having that finishing mentality. How important would this Game 4 win be for the Rangers, especially knowing in the past few postseasons they've played longer series?
Yeah, it would be very important. And you look back at 2012 when Ottawa and Washington both took them to 7 games in the first 2 rounds, and they were tired by the end of that conference final against the Devils. They were probably the better team, but played a lot of minutes, a lot of games, especially their key defensemen, McDonough and Girardi. So that was talked about prior to Game 2 in this series, and then the Flyers go out and win Game 2. So I think from a Rangers standpoint, obviously you want to win every game in the playoffs, but imperative to take a 3-1 lead and then head home for the Game 5 on Sunday.
I asked this question to John Van Beesbrook and Dave Maloney, your broadcast partner, and it was about Henrik Lundqvist. And we all know how much he's meant to this Rangers franchise. He has the most wins from a goalie in the Rangers franchise history, has the most shutouts, got that feat this year, got over 300 wins, has won a Vezina in the past. He has a lot of accolades to his great career, but one thing he's missing is a Stanley Cup. Do you sense a little bit of extra pressure on Lundqvist in these playoffs to try to go out there and win that cup, something he's missing from that really good resume?
Well, I don't know about extra pressure. I think he probably puts extra pressure on himself all the time in big games, especially in the playoffs. When you look at his career, before coming to the Rangers missed the playoffs 7 straight years, and since Lundqvist has been here, they made the playoffs 8 out of 9. So he has been one of the main reasons that they've turned things around, and he's basically won everything in his career except the Stanley Cup. He won championships in Sweden. He won a gold medal in 2006 in Torino. He won a silver this year. He's gotten to the conference finals. He's won the Vezina Trophy, but he hasn't won a Stanley Cup. He's in the prime of his career, 9th year in the NHL. So I think he's probably the one that puts more pressure on himself than anybody on the outside.
Before we let you run, you were on the call the other night for Columbus and Pittsburgh, and Marc-Andre Fleury, he's been a problem for the Penguins ever since they won a Stanley Cup in net in the postseason. How concerned are you with Marc-Andre Fleury? Because that was a really bad loss the other night after they once led 3-0.
And I actually thought he played really well up until the last minute of the third period. He had stopped 38 of the first 40 shots, and then kind of a brain cramp behind the net when he lost track of the puck, and Brandon Dubinsky ties the game, and then not a great goal in overtime from Fleury's standpoint, although I think it may have gotten deflected, tipped by the defenseman Matt Niskanen. But it was a tremendous atmosphere. The Blue Jackets come back from 3-0 down, win the game 4-3 in overtime. And if you're Marc-Andre Fleury, you have to be thinking back to some of those situations that have happened in the playoffs the last 2 years because they're starting to creep in again.
We know Columbus, and this is the final one as we're talking to Kenny Albert, they've been hungry to get to the playoffs for quite a long time, ever since they broke into the league in the early 2000s. And how was overall that atmosphere, though, being in that building? Because they had a tough Game 3 loss after they went up early, but Game 4 was something really special there the other night.
Yeah, no, it's a great atmosphere. They've been waiting a long time for this. They only made the playoffs once before, and that was back in 2009 when they had Rick Nash and Steve Mason on their team, among other guys involved in this Ranger Flyers series. So they won a playoff game at home for the first time last night, and the fans are so behind this Blue Jackets franchise, and it's been a great story to watch.
Do you think they'll end up winning the series, or is this one of those things where you just like Pittsburgh's offense in this thing?
It's a good question. I never really make predictions because if I knew what was going to happen, they wouldn't have to play the game.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Pittsburgh goes home, and when you look at the guys on their roster, world-class players, Crosby and Malkin both without a goal in the series, and Brandon Dubinsky's done a terrific job up against Malkin, and it's been wild. It's the first time in league history that in one series, 4 straight games, you had a team come back from 2 goals down to win. That's never happened before in the history of the NHL.
Well, Kenny, we appreciate the time today. We'll make sure we'll see you for Game 4 between the Rangers and the Flyers. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Zach. Anytime.
Kenny Albert right there joining us. We'll take a quick break here on the main event on WHIP Radio in Philadelphia, and we'll be back right after these short messages.